Hello everyone, welcome to another 3D design video brought to you by the Corona Public Library's Maker Exchange. My name is Mr. Martin, and today I'm showing you how to make a 3D printable do-it-yourself model kit. Let's get started. You will notice I am back in Tinkercad here. First thing I will do is rename my project. We're going to call it Punch Out Gift, and you'll see why in a bit. Now Snapgrid, I will make use of this feature, that's why I'm here in Tinkercad. And first we will insert a cylinder. We do need to rotate this, and next we do need to shrink it as well. Let's make it about a couple layers thick here. Oh, looks like I adjusted the wrong dimensions. Remember, you can always hit Ctrl-Z and undo the last action. So here we're going to edit the correct dimensions this time. And we have our nice what will soon be our border piece once I make it large enough. Now our goal is to create a whole boundary, so we're going to simply copy paste using Ctrl-C and Ctrl-V and rotate them to make a nice square or rectangle. And here you'll notice I'm not being too precise about the edges. They're not actually going to factor into, if I were to print this, it wouldn't really matter what those edges look like. I just need them to be connected. And so, again, I'm going to do my best to kind of just approximate here, but it doesn't need to be perfectly rounded or anything like, for example, the phone case that we created. So once they're all touching or grouped, we can select them all and make it just slightly thinner. So this would be approximately one layer thick here. Let's just make it back to normal size, and we should be ready for the next step. We're actually going to use this to build a toy. So first up, I'm going to insert a box, and I'm going to make it a little bit larger. Once that's done, I'm going to insert another box, but this time I'm immediately going to switch to the hole tool. Now moving it on over, using the shadows that come up on our original shape, to use kind of like as a guide, I'm going to simply line it up. Let's make it just a bit larger to make sure we're cutting or removing and leaving no excess material. So here, once I'm comfortable and happy with that shadow, group both objects, and there we go, we have our nice little cutout. That will soon be a car. So our soon-to-be car here needs some axles. Let's insert a cylinder and start with the first one. So by rotating it 90 degrees, we're just going to shrink it down to a workable size. And then we're going to work to attach it to the body. But before I do that, I do want to make a little bit of a cutout just going straight through the middle. If we were to print this, then having that cutout would help us attach the wheels that we're going to create. So I'm simply going to take a box, going to make it about, a few layers thick. Again, immediately switch to the hole tool, and here I'm just lining it up, making sure it's centered. And I can use the keyboard keys to move it over and create a nice little divot inside of our axle. And again, the reason I do this is so now the plastic that we'll print with is a little bit rigid, but this will help us be able to bend it just a tiny bit without breaking it to get those wheels on. Now by holding Shift and dragging the diagonal point here, I can then shrink it down just a little bit, keeping that aspect ratio. And here it doesn't matter how far into the body the object goes. Once we group it, it's all going to be the same material anyways, so we just need to make sure we have enough axle to work with. I can copy paste to create multiple of these, and using the alignment tool, make sure that they are properly lined up on the body. Once we have one side complete, we can even then copy and paste that whole side, simply rotate it, and then move it on over. Oops, rotated it the wrong way here. There we go. And again, you can use the keyboard keys or the mouse for that. And there we go. The body is complete. Now it's time to work on the wheels. So to create one wheel, let's go ahead and just insert this tube. Now you'll notice obviously this needs some adjustments. It won't work like this. We're going to shrink the radius down to be about, I believe we left off with the axles at about 6. And this should be in millimeters here. Now we don't need it to be too thick, but we also don't want it to be super thin and fragile either. So you'll notice I copied and pasted to create 2 of these. Once I had the once I had the inner kind of ring set, that's the part that's going to connect us to the axles. We want that to be a little sturdier than the actual wheel. So I'm going to enlarge the outside portion, and I could always use the alignment tool here to line them up too. But we're going to make it slightly thinner than the inside. This is just going to help it roll a bit better. Whenever you can find ways to use less print material, you should. So there we go. We've got one wheel just about done. Now we just need to group it. And now we can make more. So next up is kind of the tricky part. We're going to start by rotating the wheel here 90 degrees. And we're just going to work to line it up. Oops, that's what I get for forgetting to group it. So once I've got my wheel rotated, you might think, oh, okay, just slide it on over and figure it out. Well, no. You'll notice here I use the alignment tool to try and get it centered, but the axle is actually going to shift as opposed to the outside wheel. Now this does still help me in some ways, but now my axle is going through my work plane, which, if I were to print this in the end, we would not want. But for now, I'm simply going to oops. We're not, well, I mean I oops, but we're not going to oops. What I'm trying to do here is create just a slight cutout throughout the base of the axle. So essentially, I want to leave just enough material near the tip so that it spreads out and holds the wheel in place, but still gives it enough room to spin. So I'm actually going to shrink down my wheel just a little bit, use the hole tool, and then cut out essentially a nice tube for it to spin on. So here I did copy paste the original just so I don't lose that. And oops, again, be aware of which axes you're aligning to. I did the wrong one there. Perfect. So we've got it centered. Now we just need to shrink it just a little bit more and create that little cutout. And once again, if you want to maintain your kind of dimension ratios while you adjust the sizes, you can always hold shift when you drag on those points and it will maintain that ratio. So finally, it looks sufficiently small enough to do what I want it to do. Use the hole tool, group both objects, and there we go. So now you'll see that there is a very clear place for my wheel to be in, but I can do a little bit better, stretch this out to go all the way to the base. This way I know it's going to roll. And there we go. So hopefully my confusing wording earlier looks a little more clear. And now since we've adjusted one axle, we can just redo this to all of them. So as we did before, simply copy paste, use the alignment tool if necessary, and create your 4 axles. Or I guess we'll call them wheelbases in this case. And again, the reason I did that was just so that I can bend the tip a little bit to get the wheel to snap on, but it's not going to simply slide off just in case our print ends up being a little too thin or too thick. It's not going to inhibit the actual rolling of the wheel in any way. So there you have it. We have our 4 axes and we have our wheel. Now we just need to create more wheels. Next up is just a bit of cleaning up before the final phase. I'm just going to lay the wheel flat, create multiple copies, and then adjust my boundary to be more in line to what I'm actually printing. We don't really need it to be this large, and the reason for that is going to be clear in the next step. We're essentially going to be creating a grid that prints with our objects here that holds them in place. So if you've ever played with like a Gundam or something like that, you'll know that you can essentially pop these pieces out, twist them a little bit, and then eventually put them together. And that's what we're doing here. One thing I will add is that you may want to organize this in a way that would be easier for you to punch out or pop out. For example, if you had to twist the wheels but you didn't give yourself enough space in between them, that might be a problem. And so just something to keep in mind while we're doing this. For our final step, we're just going to create the grid that's going to hold our pieces in place. Now you might be thinking, okay, just copy paste the outside and lay it on top, and boom, there you go. Well, no. You see you have material now in places that you don't want material in. And while you could go through and simply insert a cylinder here and just cut out that part of the grid that's on the inside, for more complicated prints, that would be a whole world of trouble. So to make life easier on ourselves, we're going to insert one piece at a time. We're going to start by inserting a box. And the reason we do this is just to make it easy. If we insert a cylinder, there's curve and roundness. A nice flat box is very easy to print for whatever 3D printer. So here we ended up being about 96 millimeters long. So let's go ahead and replicate that. And let's make it nice and thin. Now here, this is one way to do it. You can always line this up to the side of the object, but you may not get good contact that way. And it might affect, for example, here the wheels, it might affect how round they are. So we actually want to go through the middle. But as with before, you don't want that material going through the object. So we're simply going to create this in pieces. And from here, we just want to adjust, copy, paste, adjust, copy, paste, all the way through the rest of our object, or the rest of our objects. And once again, just to explain why we're doing it this way. Well, for starters, if we have a single layer of material, that's going to provide enough connectivity to hold the objects in place. But it's not going to be so thick that it's going to inhibit how we can essentially take them apart and then eventually put them together. So we are likely to be left with just a little bit of a nub of material on each side where we're connecting these, but that's easily sanded off or simply cut off using something like an X-Acto knife. So again, the goal here is to be able to easily twist, pop out, punch, whatever you want to call it, but remove these objects from this grid, while at the same time holding it in place so that we can potentially, put this inside of a box to give as a gift or to carry around with us. So I'm almost through here. Notice, again, I'm simply just copying and pasting and then adjusting the length of this bar. And as with the axles, it doesn't actually matter how far into the objects we place it, just as long as we make sure to connect them. At the end, when we do group these objects together, essentially what we care about is that there is a connection. We don't really care about this bar going all the way through the car. We just need to know that at the end of the car and at the end of the bar, they are connecting and they are one solid object. So let's do that. Let's group them all together. They'll all change to be the same color, and congratulations, you have your kit ready to build. Well, first we gotta print it, but then it'll be ready to build. And once printed, you've created a nice little gift to give to someone. Remember, you can always customize this, and if you've enjoyed this video, we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.